In the winter of 1654, a young samurai traveled for 3 months through snow-laden mountains to reach the temple of Hakuin Ekaku, the most feared Zen master in all of Japan. He came seeking the secret of invincibility. He came demanding answers. He came with a sword at his side and pride in his heart. The master sat in absolute stillness. The samurai spoke of his achievements, his victories, his discipline. He asked about enlightenment, about power, about the way of the warrior. For 3 hours, he filled the room with words. Hakuin said nothing. As dawn broke on the 4th hour, the samurai, exhausted and humiliated, finally fell silent. And in that moment, that single, crystalline moment of silence, everything changed. What happened in that silence? What did the young warrior discover that transformed him from a skilled fighter into a legendary master? The answer reveals one of the most profound and misunderstood secrets in all of Eastern philosophy. A secret that the modern world has almost completely forgotten. The ancient Zen masters understood something that eludes most people even today. Silence is not the absence of sound. Silence is the presence of everything. In Japanese, there exists a concept called ma-gen, which translates poorly into English as gap or space, but means something far more profound. Ma is the pause between breaths, the space between notes that makes music beautiful, the emptiness in a room that gives it purpose. It is, paradoxically, the most powerful force in existence precisely because it appears to be nothing at all. This understanding didn't originate in Japan. Its roots stretch back through centuries of Buddhist and Taoist teaching. Laozi, the ancient Chinese sage, wrote in the Tao Te Ching, "We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want." He understood that utility comes not from substance, but from void, not from presence, but from absence. The Zen tradition, which emerged when Buddhist teachings from India merged with Chinese Taoist philosophy and later took root in Japan, elevated this principle to an art form. Zen monasteries became laboratories of silence, not the enforced quiet of punishment, but the cultivated stillness of power. Consider Bodhidharma, the legendary monk who brought Zen Buddhism from India to China in the 6th century. According to tradition, he sat facing a wall in meditation for 9 years. 9 years of silence. His disciples thought him mad, but when he finally spoke, his words carried such weight that they echo through 15 centuries to reach us today. Why? Because his silence wasn't empty, it was full. Full of observation, full of understanding, full of truth, compressed into form. The samurai culture of Japan absorbed this wisdom and transformed it into Bushido, the way of the warrior. Miyamoto Musashi, perhaps the greatest swordsman who ever lived, wrote in The Book of Five Rings, "You must understand that there is more than one kind of silence." He was undefeated in 61 duels, not because he talked about his skill, but because he embodied a silence so complete that opponents couldn't read his intentions. This wasn't about being quiet. This was about becoming a void, a space so empty that it could contain everything, see everything, respond to everything, without the interference of ego, assumption, or mental noise. But here's what the masters understood that we've forgotten. This silence isn't passive. It's not withdrawal. It's not checking out or giving up or going numb. True silence, the kind that transforms warriors into masters, is the most active state a human being can achieve. It is the difference between a stagnant pond and the depths of the ocean. Both appear still on the surface. Only one contains infinite life. The first dimension of silence that the masters cultivated was what the Zen tradition calls kokoro no shizukesa, stillness of heart. This is where most people stumble, because they confuse stillness with suppression. Picture a young monk in the frost of dawn, sitting in a monastery garden. His mind races with thoughts, worries about his practice, memories of home, physical discomfort from the cold, judgments about his own progress. The master walks past and asks, "What are you doing?" The monk replies, "I'm trying to quiet my mind." The master laughs and says, "Trying to stop thinking is like trying to stop the ocean from having waves. Instead, learn to dive beneath them." This is the first secret. Silence isn't the elimination of thoughts. It's the deepening of awareness until you touch something beneath thought itself. When Takuan Soho, the legendary Zen master and sword teacher, instructed samurai in the 17th century, he taught them about mushin, the mind of no mind. Warriors would ask him, "How do I quiet my thoughts in battle?" He would respond with a question, "When you draw your sword, where does your mind go?" Most warriors would say their mind focuses on the opponent, on technique, on victory. Takuan would shake his head. "That's why you'll lose," he'd say. "The master's mind goes nowhere. It is everywhere and nowhere at once." This sounds like mystical nonsense until you understand what he meant. When your mind fixates on one thing, one fear, one desire, one thought, it becomes trapped, like a bird that flies into a cage and cannot find its way out, even when the door is open. But when your mind rests in silence, it becomes like water. It takes the shape of whatever container it encounters, yet maintains its own essence. It flows without forcing. It responds without planning. The ancient text Hagakure, the secret teachings of the samurai, states, "In the space of one breath, all of life and death is decided. Not in the clash of swords, not in the display of strength, in the breath, in that silent moment of presence, the outcome is already determined." Why? Because the warrior who has mastered inner silence sees clearly. He doesn't project his fears onto the situation. He doesn't let his ego cloud his perception. He responds to what is, not to what he imagines or remembers or hopes for. Consider your own life for a moment. How often do you react to your thoughts about a situation rather than the situation itself? Someone speaks to you in a certain tone, and before they finish their sentence, you've constructed an entire narrative. They're judging you. They don't respect you. They're trying to diminish you. But is that what's happening? Or is that the noise of an unstilled mind? The Taoist sage Zhuangzi told a story of a skilled swimmer who could navigate the most dangerous rapids. When asked his secret, he said, "I enter with the inflow and emerge with the outflow. I follow the way of the water and do not impose my own will. This is how I survive." He wasn't describing a swimming technique. He was describing the power of silence, the ability to perceive reality without the distortion of mental noise, and therefore to respond with perfect timing and precision. This is not passivity. This is ultimate responsiveness. The difference is everything. The second dimension the masters understood was the silence that exists between action and reaction, what Korean martial philosophy calls the warrior's gap. In the traditional Korean martial art of Taekyon, masters teach students not just to fight, but to find the space between movements. They say, the ordinary fighter connects action to reaction like beads on a string, one immediately following the other. The master places a gap between them, a space of pure awareness, and in that gap, wisdom enters. Admiral Yi Sun-sin, one of Korea's greatest military strategists, embodied this principle during the Japanese invasions of the 1590s. Historical records show that before every major battle, while his officers urged immediate action, Yi would sit in contemplative silence, sometimes for hours. His enemies interpreted this as hesitation. His own men sometimes questioned his resolve. But Yi understood something profound. The silence before action is where strategy is born, not in frantic planning, but in deep listening to the enemy, to the terrain, to the currents of the sea, and most importantly, to his own inner knowing. In his most famous victory, the Battle of Myeongyang, Yi faced a Japanese fleet of 333 ships with only 13 vessels under his command. Every tactical manual would declare the battle impossible to win. But Yi sat in silence for an entire morning, observing the tides, the wind, the narrow strait. When he finally gave the order to engage, it was with such precision and timing that he destroyed or damaged over 30 enemy ships without losing a single vessel of his own. The silence wasn't empty thinking. It was full listening. The ancient texts distinguish between two types of silence: the silence of the dead and the silence of the master. The dead are silent because they cannot speak. The master is silent because he is completely present, completely aware, completely alive to the moment. One is the absence of life. The other is the fullness of it. Zen master Hakuin, whom we met at the beginning, had a teaching method that terrified his students. When they would ask him questions, profound questions, about enlightenment, about Buddha nature, about the meaning of existence, he would often respond with deafening silence. Days would pass, weeks. Some students would leave in frustration, but those who remained, who sat with the silence, who let it work on them like water on stone, discovered something extraordinary. The question was the answer. Their seeking was the obstacle. The moment they stopped filling the space with words and concepts and clever thoughts, truth revealed itself not as something to be grasped, but as something that had been there all along. The Japanese call this kensho, seeing into one's true nature. And it never comes through accumulation of knowledge. It comes through subtraction, through silence, through the removal of everything that obscures what already is. Sun Tzu, the ancient Chinese military strategist, wrote in The Art of War, "In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity." But he also wrote something less often quoted. The general who wins the battle makes many calculations in his temple before the battle is fought. Notice, in his temple, in silence, in stillness. The victory doesn't happen on the battlefield. It happens in the silent space of deep contemplation before action is taken. This is the warrior's gap, the space between stimulus and response. And in that space lies all human freedom, all wisdom, all power. So how do you apply this ancient wisdom in a world that celebrates noise, rewards constant talking, and equates silence with weakness or awkwardness? First, understand that mastering silence doesn't mean becoming a hermit or taking a vow of muteness. It means developing the capacity to choose when to speak and when to listen with your entire being. In your next conversation, practice this. Before responding, take one full breath, one breath of complete silence. You'll be shocked at how different your response becomes when it emerges from stillness rather than from immediate reaction. Second, create what the monks call silence anchors throughout your day. These are brief moments, perhaps 60 seconds, where you completely disengage from input. No phone, no music, no podcast, no conversation, just you and awareness. The Zen masters would practice this hundreds of times a day, between every activity. You can start with 3 times: morning, midday, and before sleep. In these moments, don't try to think about anything or achieve any state. Simply exist in the space between thoughts. This single practice, done consistently, will transform your relationship with your own mind. Third, learn to recognize the difference between productive speech and noise. Before you speak in a meeting, in an argument, in a casual conversation, ask yourself, is this adding value? Or am I simply filling silence because silence makes me uncomfortable? The masters taught that words should be like gold coins, spent rarely and only when they purchase something of value. Most people treat words like sand, abundant, cheap, scattered everywhere without thought. Fourth, cultivate what Confucius called ting, deep listening. When someone speaks to you, practice listening with such complete attention that there is no space for judgment, planning your response, or internal commentary. This kind of listening is a gift so rare in our modern world that people will feel it like a physical presence. You will become magnetic, not because of what you say, but because of the quality of your silence. Fifth, understand that silence is power in negotiation, in conflict, in leadership. When everyone else is shouting, reacting, filling the air with words, your silence becomes a force. Not passive silence, but conscious, aware, present silence. People will lean in. They will reveal themselves. They will make mistakes while you remain centered. The modern world will resist this. It profits from your noise, your distraction, your constant output and input. But the masters knew, the person who controls the silence controls the conversation. The person who can sit in stillness controls their own mind. And the person who controls their own mind cannot be controlled by circumstances. Let us return to that temple in the winter of 1654, to the young samurai sitting before Hakuin in exhausted silence. What happened in that moment? The historical records tell us that the samurai later became one of Hakuin's most accomplished students. He said that in that silence, for the first time in his life, he heard his own heartbeat without the interference of thought. He felt the weight of his own presence without the distortion of ego. And in that moment, he realized that everything he'd been seeking, invincibility, enlightenment, mastery, was already present within him. It had always been there, waiting beneath the noise. Hakuin's silence wasn't a rejection of the samurai's questions. It was the answer itself, louder than any words could be. The secret the masters discovered is this: silence is not empty. It is full. It is not weakness. It is ultimate strength. It is not the absence of power. It is power in its purest, most condensed form. You don't need to retreat to a mountain temple to discover this. You need only to stop, to breathe, to create a space within yourself where truth can echo in the stillness. The ancient masters are still teaching, even now, but they're not using words. Are you finally ready to listen?